if it might be helpful or interesting for people to hear a little bit of a discussion about that, because it's something that I think a lot of people don't think about, and then when they encounter something that is more challenging musically, they kind of scratch their head and maybe don't know what to do with it too much, because there's this kind of overlap between Orthodox liturgical life and what you're doing. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about the genre, and yeah, what and also what you see the significance of it, I guess.
Sure. Maybe as the historian here, I'll take a stab since you asked about the origins. I mean, the idea of having texts, hymn texts, and music in combination or separately that are somehow related to the spiritual life is actually a very ancient one. And it's one that we find, for example, in hymns. We'll take the hymns, the Kontaki of St. Romanus the Melodist. Those were not actually in the full, not just the prologues that we sing that we call the Kontakion, but his 24, 26 stanza hymns. And also the hymns of St. Ephrem the Syrian, that those were hymns that where their texts talked about various feasts of the church year, various events in the life of our Lord, and so on, but did so in a musical format that were not intended to be part of any particular morning or evening office of the cycle of prayer. They were actually done at things like, in St. Romanus's case, in vigils, all-night vigils, as the sorts of things people would hear as they stayed in church all night between the services. And that since then, there's been, one can also point to, well, the hymns of Saint Simeon the New Theologian, which are non-liturgical, or which are actually not in any of the normal meters or meant to be set to music, but they are hymns for contemplation. And likewise, one can find certain types of music, including textless music in both early Western chant and Eastern chant as well, that is kind of on the borders of actual liturgical use in some cases. So there's and this is something that then continues in the Eastern Orthodox tradition very much to the present. I mean, there are pieces that were designed to be sung, for example, as people ate, whether in a monastic setting, in a trapeza, that we know that there were certain pieces performed, or at the patriarchal court, or back when there was a Roman emperor in Constantinople, we have the books of ceremonies that certain hymns would be sung as well. So the notion of sort of a contemplative use of music that has sacred texts, that is there somehow for a spiritual benefit that's not part of the daily office, is again very much a part of the tradition, and it's something that perhaps people might be more familiar with when the manifestations of it that are in the world of what we would sometimes call folk music or traditional music. So the Russian duchovnie stichi, for example, their spiritual songs. There are the Greek kalenda, the kolinda of Romania as well. So one can also think of the concentric circles moving out from the official liturgy of the church, and whether those be in kind of high forms, in classical meters in some cases. Look at some of the hymnographers of the church who wrote things that really weren't intended for normal liturgical use, or at the other end of the spectrum, coming out through the folk culture. So the notion of it coming out through modern concert culture, to bring into the present, is something that has strong precedence in the past, and also speaks to a notion as well of what listening to music is about that is very different from the prevailing American, modern commercialized American notion of entertainment. That's certainly not what 19th century Europeans thought of their art music. I mean, they even had a word for it, that art could be like religion, that was somehow similar to Kunstreligion in German, one of those wonderful German combinations. So anyway, I mean, that's the kind of the history intellectual world that these things come by. And one can only then think about, Bach Passions and other pieces as well. There are many, many sort of Western things that we could talk about too.
I think that should be helpful, because I think a lot of people, especially people that kind of come to Orthodoxy, have a difficult time kind of finding a place for this without having the kind of historical perspective, and then also without having an actual Orthodox culture around them that's feeding them.
That's the thing. It's not so much of a surprise in a place like Greece or Russia.
Right. Yeah.